The cold Montana winter of 1876 was no place for a woman with secrets. But Zelda Thompson had run out of options when she stepped off the stagecoach in Whispering Pines. Her threadbare coat pulled tight against the biting wind, and a small Bible clutched to her chest like armor. The town looked like every other frontier settlement she'd passed through, weathered buildings shouldering against each other as if for warmth, horses hitched to posts. Men with hard eyes who paused just a moment too long when a woman traveling alone appeared in their midst. Zelda kept her gaze down, hoping no one would see the exhaustion etched into her 23-year-old face, or the desperation that had driven her to this remote outpost where no one knew her name. She'd heard there was work at the boarding house, and with only $3 to her name, she needed it desperately. The building wasn't difficult to find, a 3-story structure with peeling white paint and a hand-carved sign that read Widow Palmer's Boarding and Lodging. As she climbed the steps, Zelda whispered a prayer that the position hadn't been filled. Mrs. Palmer was a sturdy woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed the young woman at her door. "You the one who sent the letter about the housekeeping position?" "Yes, madam, Zelda Thompson. You're younger than I expected." The older woman's lips pursed. "But you look strong enough. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam, and clean and launder. Can you read? I need someone to help with the accounts." Zelda felt her throat tighten. This was the moment she dreaded in every interview. I can manage some words, madam." Mrs. Palmer's eyebrow arched. "Some words, girl, either you can read or you can't." I know my letters, but..." Zelda clutched her Bible tighter. "The words don't always make sense to me. They jumble themselves up." She waited for the dismissal, for the door to close in her face as it had so many times before. Instead, Mrs. Palmer sighed heavily. "Well, I suppose the books can wait. The guests can't. $6 a month, room in the attic, Sundays off unless there's an emergency. You eat after the guests are served, and I don't tolerate drinking or men in your room." "Understood." Relief flooded through her. "Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Start now. Kitchen's through there." Mrs. Palmer gestured toward the back of the house. "And girl, don't make me regret this." The attic room was small but clean, with a narrow bed tucked under the eaves and a wash basin on a simple stand. After unpacking her meager belongings, 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, and a small photograph of her parents, Zelda placed her Bible on the rickety bedside table. It had been her mother's, one of the few possessions she'd managed to save from the fire that had claimed her childhood home and both her parents 5 years ago. Every night since then, she tried to read from it, struggling through the familiar passages her mother had once read aloud, but the letters swam before her eyes, rearranging themselves into incomprehensible patterns that made her head ache. Yet still she tried, determined to maintain this connection to her past. The next few days passed in a blur of work. Zelda rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the boarders, cleaned rooms through the morning, assisted with lunch, then tackled the never-ending laundry before helping serve dinner. Mrs. Palmer was strict but fair, and the work was no harder than what Zelda had done on her family's farm. It was on her first Sunday off that she finally had a chance to explore Whispering Pines. The town consisted of one main street flanked by businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small bank, the sheriff's office, a barber shop, and at the far end, a whitewashed church. Zelda had always found comfort in church, even if she couldn't follow along with the readings. She slipped into a back pew just as the service was beginning. The church was nearly full, a testament to the piety, or at least the social conventions, of the frontier town. The minister, a thin man with an impressive beard, spoke about enduring hardship with faith. Zelda listened intently, trying to commit his words to memory since she couldn't record them herself. After the service, she lingered, admiring the simple beauty of the building. The wooden pews gleamed with years of use and polishing, and colorful light streamed through the small stained glass window behind the pulpit. "First time in town," the voice startled her. She turned to find a man in his late 20s watching her with curious blue eyes. He wore a clean but well-worn shirt and trousers with a hint of trail dust on his boots. Not a town dweller then, Is it that obvious? She asked. He smiled, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. It's a small town, new faces stand out. He extended his hand. Noah Vance. I ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Zelda Thompson. She shook his hand briefly. I just started working at Widow Palmer's boarding house. Ah, that explains it. His smile widened. Mrs. Palmer keeps her help so busy they rarely see daylight. You must have Sundays off. Yes. It's my first chance to see the town. And you chose church. Most newcomers head straight for the saloon. There was no judgment in his voice, just gentle teasing. I've always found peace in church, she admitted, even when I can't follow along with the readings. Something in her tone must have revealed more than she intended, because his expression shifted to one of curiosity. Before he could ask any questions, the minister approached them. Mr. Vance, good to see you in town. And who is this young lady? Reverend Miller, this is Miss Thompson. She's new to Whispering Pines, working at the boarding house. Welcome, my dear. We're always glad to see new faces in our congregation. The minister's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. Will you be joining us for the Bible study on Wednesday evenings? Zelda felt her cheeks warm. I'm afraid I wouldn't be much use at a Bible study, Reverend. Nonsense. All are welcome, regardless of their knowledge of Scripture. It's not that, sir. She hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding her shame. I struggle with reading. The words don't behave for me like they do for others. Instead of pity or dismissal, the minister nodded thoughtfully. I've known others with similar difficulties. The Lord speaks to us in many ways, not just through written words. You're still welcome to join us. Noah was watching her with a thoughtful expression. If you'd like, Miss Thompson, I could walk you back to the boarding house. It's getting late, and Mrs. Palmer likely expects you back for the evening meal. Grateful for the excuse to escape further discussion of her deficiency, Zelda nodded. Thank you, Mr. Vance. That would be kind. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the town, distant piano music from the saloon, children's laughter, the blacksmith's hammer creating a backdrop to their steps. You know, Noah finally said, my younger sister had the same trouble with letters. Ma tried to teach her, but the words would jumble up in her mind. Zelda glanced at him sharply. What happened to her? A shadow crossed his face. Scarlet fever took her when she was 12. But before that, I used to help her. Found that if she followed the words with her finger, one at a time, she could sometimes make sense of them. They had reached the boarding house, and Zelda paused at the bottom of the steps. That's very kind of you to share, Mr. Vance. I'm sorry about your sister. It was a long time ago. He tipped his hat. I come into town most Sundays for supplies after church. Perhaps I'll see you again next week. Perhaps. She offered a small smile before heading inside, wondering why her heart was beating a little faster than normal. The following week passed in a similar rhythm of work, though Zelda found herself looking forward to Sunday with an anticipation that surprised her. When she arrived at church, she scanned the congregation and felt an unexpected flutter when she spotted Noah's tall form near the middle of the sanctuary. He saw her enter and shifted slightly, making room beside him on the pew. Hesitantly, she made her way to his side, aware of curious glances from the other parishioners. A young, unmarried woman sitting with a bachelor was bound to start whispers, but the desire for friendly company outweighed her concern for propriety. Good morning, Miss Thompson, Noah greeted her with a warm smile. Mr. Vance. She nodded, settling her skirts around her. I was hoping you'd come today. I brought something for you. From inside his coat, he withdrew a small, worn book. It belonged to my sister. Simple stories with larger print than most books. I thought you might like to try it. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Zelda accepted the book. Thank you, that's very kind. The service began before they could talk further, but throughout the minister's sermon, Zelda was acutely aware of Noah beside her, the clean scent of soap, the way his hands rested easily on his knees, the occasional nod of agreement with the reverend's words. After the service, Noah invited her to join him for lunch at the small cafe next to the general store. It's perfectly respectable, he assured her when he saw her hesitation. Right in the middle of town, windows facing the street, Mrs. Palmer won't hear any gossip that might trouble her. The cafe was indeed public enough to avoid impropriety, with several families and other church-goers already seated at the simple tables. The owner, a plump woman named Mrs. Henshaw, greeted them warmly. "Noah Vance, as I live and breathe, haven't seen you in here for weeks." She eyed Zelda with undisguised curiosity. "And who's your friend?" "This is Miss Zelda Thompson, Mrs. Henshaw. She's working at the boarding house. Miss Thompson, Mrs. Henshaw makes the best apple pie in the territory." "Flatterer." Mrs. Henshaw swatted him with her apron. "Sit wherever you like." "Sunday special is roast beef with potatoes." They settled at a table by the window, and Noah asked about Zelda's first weeks in town. She told him about her work at the boarding house, carefully avoiding any mention of her past. In turn, he spoke of his small ranch, the cattle he was raising, and his hopes to expand his herd in the coming year. "It's not much," he admitted, "just 40 acres and 30 head of cattle, but it's mine, free and clear. My pa staked the claim before the war, and I've been working it since he passed 5 years back." "You manage it alone?" Zelda asked, impressed. "I have a hand who helps with the heavy work, Eduardo, a Mexican fellow who's been with us since pa's time. Good man. Between the two of us, we make do." After lunch, Noah walked her back to the boarding house, carrying the small book he'd given her. At the steps, he hesitated. "Miss Thompson, Zelda, I was wondering if you might like some help with this." He gestured to the book. "If you're free any evening this week, I could stop by after dinner. We could sit on the porch, keep everything proper." The offer was tempting. Zelda had tried for years to improve her reading on her own with little success. "That's very kind, but Mrs. Palmer might not approve of visitors. Then perhaps during your break time." "I usually come to town on Wednesdays for supplies." After a moment's consideration, Zelda nodded. "I have an hour after lunch, around 2 o'clock. Mrs. Palmer allows me to take tea in the garden if the weather's fine. Then I'll see you Wednesday at 2, weather permitting." He handed her the book with a smile that made her cheeks warm. Until then. Wednesday dawned clear and surprisingly mild for early March. Zelda moved through her morning chores with unusual energy, earning a raised eyebrow from Mrs. Palmer. "You're in fine spirits today, girl." "Any particular reason?" "Just enjoying the sunshine, madam." Mrs. Palmer looked unconvinced but didn't press the matter. At precisely 2 o'clock, Zelda stepped into the small garden behind the boarding house, carrying a tray with tea and the simple cookies she'd baked that morning. Noah was already waiting, hat in hand, looking slightly nervous but pleased to see her. "Miss Thompson," he nodded politely, "I wasn't sure if you'd have time. Please call me Zelda." She set the tray on the small iron table. "And I told Mrs. Palmer I was expecting a visitor." She seemed surprised but didn't object. They settled on the bench, and Zelda poured the tea while Noah retrieved the book from his saddlebag. When they were comfortable, he opened it to the first page. "These are simple stories," he explained. "Children's tales, really, but they're a good place to start. Let's try this one." The page showed a colorful illustration of a farm with animals, and below it, several lines of large text. Noah positioned the book between them and gently took Zelda's hand. "My sister found it helped to trace each word as she read it, like this." He guided her index finger to the first word. Once, Zelda felt the warmth of his hand on hers, a simple touch that nonetheless sent a ripple of awareness through her. She focused on the word. Once. Upon. He moved her finger to the next word, upon. Time, she smiled, looking up at him. "Once upon a time, that's it." His eyes crinkled with encouragement. "Let's continue." They worked through the simple story about a farmer's clever pig, with Noah guiding her finger from word to word, patiently waiting when she struggled, never showing frustration when she needed to sound out the same word multiple times. By the time they reached the end of the short tale, Zelda felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. "That was wonderful," Noah said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. "You're a quick study." "It's easier with help," she admitted. "When I try alone, the letters seem to dance around, but following with my finger just as you showed me, it anchors them somehow." "My sister said the same thing." He closed the book, his hand lingering near hers on the cover. "Would you like to try again tomorrow?" Zelda hesitated. "I don't want to impose on your time. Surely you have work at your ranch." Eduardo can manage for a few hours, and I'm often in town anyway." His expression grew more serious. "Unless you'd rather not continue, no, I would very much." The words came out more eagerly than she'd intended, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Noah's smile returned. "Then I'll be here tomorrow, same time." True to his word, Noah appeared at the garden gate the next day and the day after that. Each afternoon, they spent an hour with the little book, making steady progress through its simple stories. By the end of the week, Zelda could read an entire page with only occasional guidance, though the longer words still challenged her. On Sunday, they sat together in church again, and this time Zelda noticed the speculative glances from other parishioners. Mrs. Palmer had also begun giving her knowing looks whenever she mentioned taking her break in the garden, but the older woman hadn't objected to the arrangement. After church, Noah invited her for another lunch at Mrs. Henshaw's cafe. As they ate, he seemed preoccupied, his usual easy conversation replaced with thoughtful silence. "Is everything all right?" Zelda finally asked. "You seem troubled." He set down his fork. "Not troubled, just thinking." He met her gaze directly. "We've finished the children's book. I was wondering if you might want to try something else." "Another book, something more meaningful." He hesitated. "I noticed you carry a Bible. Is it important to you?" Zelda touched her reticule where the small Bible rested. "It was my mother's, one of the few things I have left of her. She used to read from it every night, but since I've been on my own, I haven't been able to read it myself." Noah's expression softened. "Would you like to try, with the same method we've been using?" The idea of finally being able to read her mother's Bible made Zelda's heart swell. "Yes, I would like that very much." "Then we'll start tomorrow," he smiled, reaching across the table to briefly touch her hand. "And Zelda, I've enjoyed these past days more than I can say. Your company has been a blessing." The sincerity in his voice warmed her from within. "For me as well, Noah." The next day, instead of bringing her tea to the garden, Zelda led Noah to the small parlor Mrs. Palmer reserved for guests. The older woman had given permission for them to use it, on the condition that the door remain open. "She thinks you're courting me," Zelda explained, blushing as she set her mother's Bible on the small table. Noah's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "And what do you think?" The directness of his question took her breath away. I think I wouldn't mind if you were." A slow smile spread across his face. "Good, because I am." He took his seat beside her, close but not improper. "Now, shall we begin?" The Bible presented new challenges. The print was smaller, the language more complex, and many of the names were unfamiliar to Zelda. But Noah was endlessly patient, guiding her finger along each line, helping her sound out the difficult words, explaining passages she didn't understand. They began with the Psalms, which Noah said were like poetry and might be easier to connect with. The rhythm of the verses did seem to help, and Zelda found herself drawn into the beautiful language even when she struggled with individual words. March turned to April, and their daily lessons continued. Sometimes they worked in the parlor, sometimes in the garden when the weather was fine. Occasionally, when Noah had business that kept him at the ranch, Zelda would practice on her own, carefully tracing each word with her finger as he had taught her. On a particularly lovely spring afternoon, Noah arrived at the boarding house with a picnic basket instead of his usual saddlebag. "I thought we might take our lesson outside today," he suggested. "There's a nice spot by the creek just outside of town. We could read there." Mrs. Palmer, who had grown quite fond of Noah during his daily visits, nodded her approval. "Just be back before dark, girl, and mind your reputation." The spot Noah had chosen was indeed beautiful, a grassy bank beside a clear creek, shaded by cottonwood trees whose new leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. They spread a blanket and unpacked the simple meal he had brought: bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of preserves. After they ate, Noah reached for the Bible they had brought, but instead of opening it immediately, he set it aside and turned to face Zelda. "Before we begin today's reading, there's something I want to say." His usually confident voice held a hint of nervousness. "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember, not just because I'm helping you read, but because I'm with you." Zelda's heart began to race. "Noah, please let me finish." He took her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long, but I feel as though I've known you forever. There's a goodness in you, a strength and determination that I admire, and I find myself thinking about you every moment we're apart." She squeezed his hands, emotion making it difficult to speak. "I think about you too." His face lit up with hope. Then, "Would you consider coming out to the ranch someday? I'd like to show you my home, and maybe someday, if things continue as they are between us, it could be your home too." The implication of his words was clear, even if he hadn't made a formal proposal. Zelda felt a flutter of joy, but also a stab of anxiety. There was so much of her past she hadn't shared. "Noah, there are things you don't know about me, about why I came to Whispering Pines. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me." His blue eyes held nothing but sincerity. "We all have pasts, Zelda. It's the future I'm interested in." She took a deep breath. "I was engaged once, back in Kansas, to the son of the wealthiest man in our county. My parents were gone, and I was alone on our farm, struggling to make ends meet. Richard, that was his name. He seemed kind at first. He knew about my trouble with reading, and he said it didn't matter, that a wife didn't need to read." Noah's expression darkened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "After we were engaged, he changed, became controlling, mocking. Used my illiteracy to trick me into signing papers that gave him rights to my farm. When I discovered what he'd done and confronted him, She touched her cheek unconsciously, remembering the blow. "He showed his true nature. Did he hurt you?" Noah's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Yes, and he threatened worse if I told anyone or tried to break the engagement. His father was the judge in our county. No one would have believed me over him." She looked down at their joined hands. "So I ran, left everything behind and headed west with what little money I had saved. That's how I ended up here." Noah was quiet for a long moment, processing her story. Finally, he reached up to gently touch her face, tilting it so she had to meet his eyes. "Thank you for trusting me with this. It only makes me admire your courage more." Relief washed through her. "You're not disappointed in you? Never." His thumb brushed her cheek softly. "In the man who treated you so badly, absolutely. But that's his shame, not yours." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I was afraid you'd think less of me, for being so foolish, for running away. You survived, Zelda. You protected yourself the only way you could." He shook his head firmly. "There's no shame in that." In that moment, with the sun filtering through the leaves above them and the gentle sound of the creek beside them, Zelda realized she had fallen in love with Noah Vance. His kindness, his patience, the respect with which he treated her, these were the true marks of a good man. "I'd very much like to see your ranch," she said softly. "And yes, if things continue between us, I would like to think about a future together." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief but perfect, a promise of more to come. When he drew back, both of them were breathless. "Now," he said, reaching for the Bible with a slightly unsteady hand, "shall we continue with our lesson?" Zelda laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Yes, let's." He opened to the place they had marked, the Book of Ruth, and positioned the Bible between them. As always, he took her hand and guided her finger to the first word. And, she repeated, focusing on the letters, "Naomi, Naomi." Together they read the ancient love story, their shoulders touching, the future stretching before them like an unwritten page. The following Sunday, Noah invited Zelda to visit his ranch after church. Mrs. Palmer gave her permission to be gone for the afternoon, with a knowing smile and a reminder to be back by supper. "It's not much," Noah warned as they approached the property. "Nothing like the big spreads further south." But to Zelda, the neat cabin with its solid porch, the well-built barn, and the fenced pastures where cattle grazed contentedly looked like paradise. A small vegetable garden grew beside the house, and wildflowers dotted the surrounding meadows. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "You've done well here." Eduardo, Noah's ranch hand, greeted them warmly. He was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes who tipped his hat respectfully to Zelda. "Señorita Thompson, welcome. The boss has talked much about you." His English was accented but clear. All good things, I hope, she replied with a smile, very good things. Eduardo's knowing glance between them made Zelda blush. I have prepared lunch, nothing fancy but good food. The meal was indeed simple but delicious beans, cornbread, and beef stew that had been simmering all morning. They ate at the rough-hewn table in Noah's cabin, the conversation flowing easily between the three of them. After lunch, Eduardo excused himself to check on a pregnant heifer, leaving Noah and Zelda alone. Noah showed her around the cabin, which was sparse but well kept. A small bookshelf held a dozen volumes more books than Zelda had ever owned. You like to read, she observed, when there's time. Which isn't often during calving season. He ran his fingers along the spines. But these were my mother's. Reading was important to her, especially after we came west, said it kept her connected to civilization. Zelda thought of her own mother, who had treasured her Bible for similar reasons. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Noah's expression grew thoughtful. She would have liked you, I think. She always said the measure of a person isn't what they know, but how hard they're willing to work to learn. The afternoon passed quickly as Noah showed her the rest of his property. They walked the boundary of his land, checked on the cattle, and ended at a small rise that overlooked the entire ranch. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, painting the landscape in gold and amber. What do you think? Noah asked, his voice hesitant. Could you see yourself here someday? Zelda looked out over the peaceful scene. Yes, she said simply. I could. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. Zelda, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, your strength, your determination, your heart. I love the way your eyes light up when you master a difficult passage, the way you never give up even when it's hard. Her heart felt too full for her chest. I love you too, Noah, your patience, your kindness, the way you've never once made me feel lesser because of what I struggle with. Then marry me. The words were direct, honest, like everything about him. Be my wife, my partner in all things. Let me build a life with you. Tears of happiness blurred her vision. Yes, yes, I will marry you. He pulled her into his arms, his kiss deeper and more passionate than their first. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead against hers. We should head back before Mrs. Palmer sends out a search party. The ride back to town was filled with plans and dreams. They decided on a June wedding, giving them time to prepare but not so long that they had to endure a lengthy engagement. Noah wanted to add a room to the cabin and improve the garden, while Zelda spoke of curtains she could sew and bread she would bake in her own oven. Mrs. Palmer was waiting on the porch when they arrived, her arms crossed but her expression more amused than severe. Almost supper time, girl. Was beginning to think you'd run off for good. Not yet, madam, Zelda replied with a smile, but I do have news. Mr. Vance has asked me to marry him, and I've accepted. The older woman's face softened. Well, it's about time. Been watching you two mooning over each other for weeks now. She nodded approvingly at Noah. You've chosen well, both of you. When's the wedding to be? June, madam, Noah answered. If that gives Miss Thompson enough time to make proper arrangements. HMPH. She'll need to give notice, of course. Can't leave me without help. Of course, Mrs. Palmer. I wouldn't think of it. I'll stay until you find a suitable replacement. The older woman waved a hand dismissively. We'll work something out. Now come inside before the food gets cold. She paused, giving Noah a stern look. You're welcome to join us, Mr. Vance, seeing as you'll be family soon enough. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the small town. Most reactions were positive. Noah was well respected, and Zelda had made a good impression during her months at the boarding house. A few raised eyebrows at the speed of the courtship were quieted by Mrs. Palmer's firm endorsement of the match. Reverend Miller agreed to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Henshaw volunteered to bake the wedding cake. The town's seamstress offered Zelda a discount on a simple wedding dress, which she accepted gratefully. Their Bible readings continued, but now they often took place on the boarding house porch in the evenings, with Mrs. Palmer sitting nearby in her rocking chair, providing the necessary chaperone while pretending to be absorbed in her knitting. As spring advanced toward summer, Zelda's reading improved dramatically. She could now manage entire chapters with minimal assistance, though she still preferred to trace the words with her finger, a habit that brought comfort and focus. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch with the Bible open between them, Noah suggested a different passage than their usual reading. "I thought we might look at 1 Corinthians today," he said, carefully turning the pages. Chapter 13. Zelda knew the chapter it was often read at weddings. With Noah's gentle guidance, she began to read aloud. "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud." The familiar words took on new meaning as she spoke them, her finger tracing each one while Noah's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." Her voice grew stronger with each verse. "Love never fails." When she finished the chapter, she looked up to find Noah watching her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. "You've come so far," he said softly. "I'm so proud of you. I had a good teacher." She closed the Bible, keeping her finger in place to mark the page. "But it's more than that. For the first time, I feel like the words are mine, like I have a right to them." "You always did." He took her hand, the one that had been tracing the words. "Your mother's Bible is yours by right, and so are all the words in it. Your difficulty with reading doesn't make you any less deserving of them." Mrs. Palmer cleared her throat pointedly from her rocking chair, reminding them of her presence. "Getting late, sun's almost down," Noah smiled, not taking his eyes off Zelda. "Just a few more minutes, Mrs. Palmer. I want to show Zelda one more passage before I go." He turned back a few pages and pointed to a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Zelda followed his finger and read slowly. "But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." She looked up at him in surprise, a blush spreading across her cheeks. Noah's eyes danced with mischief and something darker, more heated. 26 more days," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Not that I'm counting." "Ahem," Mrs. Palmer's cough was more pronounced this time. "That's quite enough Bible reading for tonight, I think." They reluctantly said their goodnights, but not before Noah stole a quick kiss when Mrs. Palmer's attention was momentarily diverted by a passing neighbor. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with preparations. Noah worked tirelessly on the cabin, adding the promised room and repainting the exterior. Zelda sewed curtains and linens in her spare time and, with Mrs. Palmer's help, prepared a modest trousseau. 2 weeks before the wedding, Zelda received an unexpected letter. The postmark was from Kansas, and she didn't recognize the handwriting. With trepidation, she asked Noah to read it to her when he came for their evening reading. The letter was from the sheriff of her former county. Richard, her ex-fiancé, and his father had been arrested for fraud and other crimes. It seemed she wasn't the only one they had cheated. The sheriff had tracked her down to inform her that the deed to her family farm had been restored to her name, and she was free to return if she wished. "My farm," she whispered, stunned. "It's still mine." Noah watched her carefully. "Do you want to go back?" She looked up at him, surprised by the question. "Go back? No, of course not. My life is here now with you." She took the letter and placed it in the Bible, closing it firmly. "Let them sell the farm and send me whatever it's worth. I don't need Kansas anymore." The relief on his face was evident. "I was worried for a moment. Never doubt that I choose you, Noah Vance." She reached for his hand. "My past is settled now. I can look forward without anything holding me back." Their wedding day dawned clear and warm. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the ceremony, filling the small church to capacity. Zelda wore a simple white dress with a lace collar, modest but pretty. Mrs. Palmer had arranged wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Noah waited at the altar, looking handsome in a new suit, his face alight with happiness when he saw her walking down the aisle. Eduardo stood beside him as best man, equally dapper in his Sunday best. Reverend Miller conducted the ceremony, and when it came time for the readings, he handed the Bible to Noah. "I believe you two have your own tradition for this part," the minister said with a smile. Noah opened the Bible to the passage they had chosen together. He took Zelda's hand and guided her finger to the beginning of Ruth 1:16-17. Together, they read the words aloud, their voices blending in perfect harmony. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as they exchanged simple gold bands and were pronounced husband and wife. Noah's kiss was tender but promised more, making Zelda blush when they finally separated to the applause of their friends and neighbors. The celebration continued at the town hall, where tables had been set up for a communal feast. Everyone had contributed something Mrs. Henshaw's magnificent cake was the centerpiece, but there were also roasted meats, vegetables from spring gardens, fresh bread, and pies of every description. As the sun began to set, Noah leaned close to his new wife. Ready to go home, the word home sent a thrill through her. Yes. They said their goodbyes amid good-natured teasing and well wishes. Eduardo had ridden ahead to give them privacy, promising to stay in the bunkhouse for the next few days. The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in thoughts of the day and the night ahead. When they crested the final hill and the cabin came into view, Noah stopped the wagon. "Look," he said softly, "Eduardo's been busy." The cabin was transformed. Lanterns hung from the porch, casting a warm glow in the gathering dusk. Flowers decorated the entrance and smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. "It's beautiful," Zelda whispered. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance." Noah's voice was husky with emotion. When they reached the cabin, Noah insisted on carrying her across the threshold, despite her laughing protests that it wasn't necessary. Inside, a fire burned in the hearth, and the table was set for two with the nicest dishes Noah owned. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, and a bottle of wine, a luxury in these parts, stood ready. "Eduardo thought of everything," Zelda said, touched by the ranch hand's thoughtfulness. "He wants us to be happy." Noah set her down gently but kept his arms around her. "Are you happy, Zelda?" She looked up into his face, this man who had taught her not just to read, but to believe in herself again. "Happier than I ever thought possible." He kissed her then, all the restraint of their courtship giving way to the passion they'd held in check for so long. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "Hungry?" he asked, his voice rough. "Not for food," she admitted boldly, surprising herself with her forwardness. His eyes darkened. "The stew will keep." Their first night together was everything Zelda had dreamed and more. Noah was gentle, patient, guiding her through this new experience with the same care he'd shown in teaching her to read. And like reading, it was a skill that improved with practice, which they dedicated themselves to with enthusiasm. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight filtering through the new curtains she had sewn, Noah reached for something beside the bed. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, placing a small package in her hands. Curious, Zelda unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pencil. "I thought you might like to write your own words now," Noah explained. "Your thoughts, memories, dreams, you've mastered reading. Writing is the next step." Tears filled her eyes at his thoughtfulness. "Will you teach me, like you taught me to read, one letter at a time?" He kissed her softly. "We have the rest of our lives." In the years that followed, Zelda filled that journal and many others. She wrote about their life together on the ranch, which prospered under their joint care. She recorded the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Ruth, and 2 years later, a son they called Samuel. She wrote of Eduardo's marriage to the widow who bought the general store and Mrs. Palmer's retirement to a small cottage Noah helped build on their land. Her writing improved along with her reading, until the words flowed as easily onto the page as they had once eluded her. She began to write stories for her children, simple tales at first, then more complex narratives as they grew older. And every night she and Noah would sit by the fire, their Bible open between them, reading together just as they had from the beginning. His finger no longer needed to guide hers, she could follow the words on her own now, but sometimes he would take her hand anyway, a reminder of where their journey together had begun. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Noah presented her with another gift, a small printing press. "For your stories," he explained. "The children at school love them. I thought others might too." Zelda stared at the press in amazement. You think my stories are good enough to print? I think they're wonderful. He put his arm around her shoulders. Just like you. She leaned against him, watching Ruth teaching her younger brother to read, using the same finger-tracing method Noah had once used with her. Did you ever imagine that first day in church that we'd end up here? She asked. Noah kissed the top of her head. I hoped. From the moment you told me about your struggle with reading, I admired your courage, and when you let me help you, trusted me with your vulnerability. I think I fell in love right then. And I fell in love with your patience, the way you never made me feel less than. She turned in his arms to face him. You gave me words, Noah, not just on the page, but in my heart. You always had them, Zelda, I just helped you find them. His blue eyes, a little more crinkled at the corners now but still as bright, gazed into hers. And you gave me something greater, a family, a purpose, a love I never thought I'd find. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Zelda thought of all the words she had learned in the past decade. Beautiful words, powerful words, words that had opened new worlds to her. But none were more important than the simple ones they had shared that first day over a children's book, her finger following his across the page. Once upon a time, their time. Their story, written word by word, day by day, with patience and love that would never end.